Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully everyone can see me and hear me. My name is Janice Hurley, and I am the General Manager of bnbfinder. Hopefully we've got everybody. It looks like we've got folks that are still joining us. I apologize that I'm a couple minutes late. I was just getting things settled with my internet here, and I'm hoping that I can keep my video on while I do the presentation. If there's anything that's lagging, I'll be sure to take down my video so at least we can continue the presentation. So for those of you who I haven't met yet in the industry, I've been working with INNs and B&Bs now, gosh, for about 20 years. And I started with bnbfinder.com originally and worked with them way early on, and was with them for about 15 years, went through the HomeAway acquisition, went through the Expedia acquisition, and I also had the privilege to go and run a 12-room inn and event center up in Waitsfield, Vermont from 2012 to 2014. So I certainly have a deep appreciation for all that you do at your properties, and am just thrilled to be able to be here today and be able to continue to work with all of you for all of these years. So a couple of things before we get started. A lot to cover today, so if you've attended one of our sessions before, you'll know that whenever we do these surveys, we get back so much great data and so many things that I want to share, so I try to distill it down enough so we can get as much out and keep within the hour that we have set for today. So we do have everyone muted on the call today. If you do have questions, please feel free to submit them on the questions panel there. My colleague Tim Wilson, who is going to be joining us today for the presentation, actually arrived in Austin yesterday. We have our 2022 planning meeting that starts tomorrow, and he is out in Fredericksburg, just west of Austin, and visiting some properties this afternoon. So I will get to the questions as I can as we go through, and if there's anything that gets asked that I don't get a chance to answer, I'll make sure that I follow up with everyone after the session today. And we do have a couple of polls that I just want to start with, because as we go through the questions today, this just gives me a little bit of a background on who we have on the call today, so I can customize some of the responses depending on who we have on the call. And we've almost everyone has answered. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and close that result of how many of you are members of bnbfinder. So we have quite a few members that are on the call today, which is great. So I'll be sure that we can get all of the updates towards the end of the presentation about the things that we've been working on and some upcoming announcements that we have for members. And I'm also curious to get a sense of the size of the properties that we have on the call today. So a little bit of background as we're going through these poll questions. For those of you who are members, I'm sure you've attended some of these sessions before. We started, and when I say we, I'm speaking collectively of when I worked for bnbfinder.com. Back in about 2008, we started doing quarterly surveys when the recession hit. And part of the reason was because we were really the only player in the space that had access to the largest innkeeper and the largest traveler database. And we ran those surveys quarterly to keep a tight pulse on what was happening in the industry. And with the acquisition of bnbfinder back in April of 2019, we once again had great access to a very large database of, again, innkeepers and travelers. So since the pandemic, we've been running quarterly surveys, and it's been really helpful to be able to get a sense of what's been happening out there in the industry, what you all have been experiencing, across the US and internationally, and then how travelers have been feeling about traveling. So just to give you a sense, let's see here. So this is very close to what we have from the innkeepers who responded to the survey. So most of the properties on the call today have between 4 to 6 rooms. And then the next highest is about 6 to 10. So I've got one more question that I want to ask before we dive in, and that's to find out what region you're located in. And part of this is, when we look at the survey results, we have quite a few properties that are located in the Northeast. Of course, not surprising, because there are so many properties that are located up in the Northeast, which is where I'm from originally. So just want to get a sense of where folks are from on the call today. It looks like we've got about 85% who've responded. So I'll go ahead and close this one and share it as well. And so this aligns perfectly with what we're seeing in the survey participation. So I'm going to go ahead and close this survey and make sure everyone can see my screen. Perfect. So looks like you're getting the innkeeper survey results and the participation. So one thing I'd like to say before we get started is that anytime we send out these surveys, I always ask for as much participation as possible. And I've been doing this a long time, and if we get a large enough sample size in whatever destination it is, I'm happy to go in and pull results that are specific to your destination. I use SurveyMonkey for all these surveys, and we have a great package with them where it allows me to go in and actually filter either by destination or demographic or whatever it might be. So thank you for everyone who did participate. You can see here, again, aligning with what we saw in just the poll that we just ran as far as who is on the call today. So average of 8 rooms, most of the properties who participated in the survey located in the Northeast. And clearly seasons have changed since we ran our summer survey. So 54% of properties are in peak season. Of course, that's down as we're trending into fall and winter. A lot of properties are currently in their shoulder season. So this last survey launched just about 3 weeks ago and just recently closed. So the results that you're looking at today will reflect that. So I also am starting to include the age of innkeepers who are participating in the surveys. This, of course, has changed over the years. A lot of inns that have been sold over the last few years, we've seen some younger innkeepers coming into the space. So I always like to just share that to give you some background. And I asked 2 questions, and I started this in the last survey that we sent out because I think it's really interesting. We talk about inns and we talk about how long an inn has been in business for, but it's also important to understand not only how long the inn has been in business, but also how long the property owners or the innkeepers who are there have been running that particular inn. So the first question that we asked was, how long has your B&B been in business? A lot of the properties, over 20 years. And what's interesting here is that then when we ask the innkeepers, how long have you been running the inn as a business? 51% of the inns in operation are more than 20 years have been run by the same innkeepers for half of that time. So certainly a lot of new folks coming in and running established businesses, as opposed to some properties that are being built now as B&Bs to be run that way. So we also started to gather some data in the last survey, the summer survey, on average daily rate. And I think this is really important because you're going to see in some of the traveler responses where the travelers, of course, are talking about, being price sensitive and price being an important factor when they're making a decision on where to book. So here you can see that the high season, the inns who participated in the survey, 88% of those properties are more than $150 a night. That was a 20% during the summer survey. So, what that tells me is that certainly innkeepers are looking at what their rates are, making sure that they're staying competitive, but also charging the value and placing where they should be placing within their markets. And then 70% in low season, more than $150 a night. So that also shows me that innkeepers are also participating yield management and changing your rates, not just having the same rate 365 days a year, but also making sure that it changes when the demand changes and as the climate changes with all the recent things that we've been dealing with in the industry. So we also wanted to get a pulse on how revenue has changed and shifted. And of course, this changes a lot depending on where properties are located, how they've been managing through the pandemic. And I think what's really interesting here is a couple of things. So we asked specifically about Q1 2021. And I think that was really a telling time for us in the industry because, you know, we really weren't sure how we were going to bounce back and how travelers were going to respond, especially coming into what is traditionally a slower season. And so we were really interested to see how Q1 of this year compared with Q1 of 2020. And 64% of the properties reported that they were ahead, either, you know, just over even ahead or have grown in revenue since 2020 to 2021, which is very promising for us to see those kinds of numbers. And then in addition to that, we wanted to look at, well, what are you expecting for your total revenues? Are you expecting this trend to continue through 2021? And then I also put in here just historically so you can see where properties reported their revenues in 2019, 2020, and then where we're expecting for 2021. So what we're seeing here is that the expected revenues are returning to pre-pandemic levels, which again is very promising and exactly the trends that we want to continue to see. So we also looked at, you know, trying to understand how this pandemic, this health event, how it's seriously damaged businesses. And across the board, you know, we talk to hundreds of inns, you know, every week, and it really depends on where you're located. There's so many factors that go into it. So this is, you know, broadly across all of the inns who participated. And I think that, you know, one of the things in looking at this, yet you can certainly see there are properties that have been seriously damaged by this, and some that have been somewhat damaged, but we had 59% of the properties who participated that said that their business has not changed or has actually improved. So we're going to look at some of the reasons why some of these properties that have been able to sustain through the pandemic. So I'm just looking here, just making sure I didn't miss anything in my questions. I saw that one innkeeper missed the survey. That's fine. And then one innkeeper is reporting that they're having some audio issues and there's no sound. So hi Todd, it's great to see your name on my screen. But I don't believe that anyone else is having any audio issues right now. Certainly let me know if that continues for you. Oh, it must be, I think you can hear me now. Perfect, wonderful, okay. So when we're looking at the traveler side of it and we're looking at the traveler data, one of the things that I like to point out is that we traditionally had always sent out our surveys to the travelers who are familiar with the B&B experience. So either they're in our traveler database or they're following us on social media. And I really wanted to start to dig into the travelers who might not be familiar with the B&B experience. So over the last several surveys that we've been putting out, we've been targeting anyone on our social media channels that are not following us, or also extending it out to friends of folks who are following us. You know, we wanted to go beyond that to make sure that we had a true barrier of potentially travelers who weren't familiar with the B&B experience. So out of the 847 travelers who responded to the fall survey, 25% of the travelers are under the age of 45. This is something that we definitely saw shift a little bit in this recent survey, which is great. I just want to get the perspective, of course, of the younger travelers and see how we align as an industry with that. And then again, nothing surprising on the regions, lots of the travelers coming from the Northeast as well. So a little bit of perspective as we start to get into this here this afternoon is as Tim was coming in yesterday from Denver, he had sent me a text and mentioned that he didn't think that he was going to be able to make his plane because of the line at security. And I thought, here's this, image that, we saw so many of these types of images back when the pandemic first started and really long into it, with lots of planes that had been grounded. And, what a difference a year makes. I don't know how many of you have been traveling by air. I was just in Boston over the weekend for my niece's baby shower. Fortunately, I didn't have the experience that Tim had, but this was a picture that he sent me from Denver International Airport yesterday. And if you have ever flown through DIA, you know that security isn't always great, but certainly nothing like this has ever been seen, where not only was the security completely backed up where it normally goes through, but it went all the way through baggage claim, and then the line went all the way through the upstairs of the airport. So clearly, yes, there are some issues with being backed up because of staffing issues and things like that, but clearly travelers are traveling again, and we are seeing that across the board. So I always like to also put in a little reminder about our competition and our challenge that we continue to have in the industry, and making sure that we are doing the best job that we possibly can to share with the traveler what the true B&B experience is. So I often go looking for things like this, and I saw this, and I mean, these are the types of things that fuel my fire to continue in this industry and elevate our category of lodging, because clearly this van is not a bed and breakfast as it is advertised here. And when I first read this, I thought, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, we cannot be competing possibly with vans, never mind all of the other things that we have challenged towards us as we are making sure that we're reaching out to travelers and really sharing what that experience is. So I also often, look at Airbnb and look at how our travelers continuing to be communicated with about the true B&B experience. And when for years there was just, you could do a checkbox and you became a bed and breakfast, and then that filter had gone away. And then it's been now, I think, about at least 2 or 3 years since they brought back that filter. And they actually did a pretty good job at weeding out some properties that did just select themselves as a bed and breakfast checkbox. But out of curiosity, I had to go into Austin and see what classified as a B&B due to the search. And this was my result. So as you can see, there is a comfy spot in South Austin for a mere $28 a night, which, as we all know, that is not possibly a professionally run bed and breakfast. I looked here and I thought, I'm sure Kathy is a lovely woman, but clearly this is not a bed and breakfast. And when a guest goes in and they just check that box and they think that they're staying in a B&B, that's where we come in and say, okay, what can we continue to do to make sure that we are clearly communicating the value, the experience, everything that makes our industry as important and as unique as it is. So before we dive into some of the specifics with both the innkeeper and the traveler results, just some high level data points that I wanted to share. So when we asked, when are you seeing bookings coming in? Only 38% of the properties this summer were seeing bookings past December of 2021. So in this most recent fall survey, it's really promising to see not only the current fall bookings that are coming in and those remaining strong, but seeing that travelers are booking out even past the beginning of the new year. So we'll continue to watch that trend and be sure to flag anything if we see anything different. Bookings also strong even with some properties that had restrictions just lifted in May, which, living in Austin, Texas, it's no secret of what how early our restrictions got lifted. And it's really was surprising to me when I saw that there were some states still that hadn't had the majority of their restrictions lifted as late as May of this year. So that's it's great that they've seen that type of recovery. So when we ask travelers if you've canceled some of your future plans, when was that travel booked for? And this was really important to track early on, because a lot of innkeepers were starting to see that surge in cancellations. And of course, that's incredibly concerning. So we want to continue to track this to make sure, you know, of course, cancellations are always going to happen, even in the best of a year, but certainly with what we've been dealing with in the current climate, we want to make sure that we have a tight pulse on that. So it's been interesting, of course, to watch this trend down as travelers aren't canceling as close to their travel date, which is showing that they're more comfortable in traveling and when they're booking. But one of the reasons why I also wanted to point this out is because when we think of a traveler's experience, we often think of it as how it relates to their experience staying at our properties and staying within our industry. And we have to think of what their experience is more broadly, right? And we have to think of it not only of the folks who are waiting in those crazy lines at the airport, but what is their experience? They're booking other types of travel, not only airline, but also other types of lodging. And certainly with the pandemic, the whole concept of a traditional cancellation policy has been flipped on its head, and we all had to adjust very quickly and make some changes to the cancellation policies. And this flexibility in booking and the flexibility in cancellation policies is not something that we have seen gone away, and nor do I think, in my opinion, and what we see being reported out, that that is something that's going to go away in the near future. And this actually just came out this morning. It came up on my radar, and I thought it was really interesting because Focus Wire, which is put out by this travel industry study firm called Focusrite, said hotel booking flexibility replaces price as the top priority. So we know how important price is to travelers. So I thought that was really interesting to show the importance of that flexibility of cancellation policy. So when we ask travelers, given the current coronavirus situation, what is the most important when you are booking lodging? And 68%, and this has not changed since we started doing these surveys over the pandemic, 68% say that flexible cancellation policy is the most important when they're making a booking decision. And even though we saw just in that last slide that, you know, folks aren't canceling nearly as close to the date when they were traveling, which is what we saw early on, they still want that confidence in knowing if something does come up, or if the climate changes again, that they do have that opportunity and that ability to cancel. And then, of course, all of the other typical items that would expect to see here that have been born of this experience, you know, of course, safety, making sure guests feel, you know, that things are sanitized properly, et cetera. But those are all givens. So managing cancellations, I put this in here because, you know, when we first looked at this, this was a question that came up on a regular basis, and innkeepers were reaching out to other inns and reaching out to associations and asking, you know, well, what are you doing to adjust your cancellation policy? And when I ran the summer survey, what I thought was interesting, and it was a little bit concerning at the time when I saw it, was that the majority of the properties who had adjusted their cancellation policy to be more flexible had decided to go back to their standard cancellation policy. And I could understand that from the perspective that we were heading into, for a lot of folks, their peak season, so they felt more comfortable with that. So that makes sense, but I definitely still caution inns to think about their cancellation policy and being more flexible when you can be, because of course we can see that it's still important to travelers, and it's what's happening across other types of lodging and other types of travel. So many of the inns still are open to issuing a gift card or a credit towards a future stay, which is a great option instead of, you know, giving that back. And I think it's also important to look at and this is where some innkeepers had put in some additional details on what they're doing to adjust their cancellation policies. So I thought it was interesting. The first property had commented that they had reduced their deposit required from 30 days prior to 2 weeks prior, and that they do allow guests to use their non-refundable deposit towards a future stay, and lots of case-by-case basis, which is great. That protects you, it protects the traveler, so that works. A lot of properties who said that they changed their cancellation from 7 days. You know, I know when I ran the inn up in Vermont, we had 2 weeks. Some of them had gone down to 24 hours. And I thought this was an interesting comment, that they kept it that way because it hadn't been abused. So, you know, really making sure that you're monitoring that. And if it's something that you have gone in and adjusted and it hasn't been abused, and we know that travelers are more confident with that, you know, continuing to do that. And then I also included this here. This property had commented that they softened their policy back in May, so early on, and they've extended it twice due to the Delta variant. They have no refunds, they do just the gift certificates. And as a result, they've seen, you know, their cash reserves increase. And also, this is great. Thank you for this comment. An innkeeper just added a comment here that that's what travel insurance is for. So I completely agree. You know, it's hard for a lot of small businesses, a lot of inns to act as that insurance policy. So allow the cancellation and letting them sit empty, you know, can certainly be a risk there. So thank you for adding that comment. That's great. So we also are looking at in travelers, you know, are you still planning to travel? More are planning to travel, but more are also unsure. And I think that also stems from the Delta variant and some guests just, you know, not being 100% confident of, you know, how things are changing. Of course, we're seeing numbers going down. So that's comforting. One thing that you can look at when you look at this data here is that, yes, you know, travelers who aren't sure or likely are not currently booking because they're still nervous. Yes, that's up 10% from what it looked like this summer, but certainly there's still the larger percentage that it hasn't affected their plans. They're extremely likely or likely to continue traveling. So we're first going to look into, on the traveler side of it, how the guests are booking, where they're going, and how confident they're feeling. So when we ask them, when are you going to start booking or planning your next vacation, there is a small percentage that is not planning to book, but they either have already booked their travel or they're going to be starting to book in the next 30 to 90 days. So anywhere from, you know, 1 month to 3 months. So that should continue to trend, and we should continue to see those travelers that have said, yes, I'm going to be traveling, you know, either in the winter or at the first of the year. So that's exactly what we want to see on trend. And then we also asked, and this is where I got to get really specific around whether you were a B&B traveler who answered the survey or you were a non-B&B traveler. So for this particular question, I filtered the results to only look at B&B guests. So travelers who said that, yes, they do regularly stay at B&Bs. And the reason why I did that is because when we look at the typical bed and breakfast traveler and their length of stay, it has traditionally been, and for those of you who've been in the industry for quite a while, you know, the average stay was 2 days, right? Or 2 nights or a weekend, something like that. But we have seen over the last year, stays trending to be longer. So you can see in these survey results, yes, long weekends, quick getaways, 3 nights or less is still a higher percentage, that's typical. But we're also seeing a surge in the number of travelers who are staying for more than 3 nights. And I have some theories on that I'll share, but that's great for our industry. One, of course, because then we don't have as many turns, and it's great for us to be able to have those longer stays, and hopefully we will continue to see that trend. How are our B&B travelers traveling. Of course, nothing new here, traveling mostly by car, but we are seeing more traveling by plane. I think that has to do with some of the rates of some of the flights that people are getting as well. And we also asked guests, we wanted to know, how many leisure trips are you planning to take for the next 12 months? So not just what you've currently booked, but what are you looking into as you look into the next year? So at minimum 1 to 2 trips, which is great. I'm going to share some data around what they're planning to spend for each trip, and then 3 to 4 trips as well. So some travelers looking to take some additional trips. And again, I have some theories on that as well. So this I wanted to share before we got into the next slide, because, you know, again, I've been doing this for a long time and I've looked at a lot of data over the years. And I found this article from 2015. And back then, they, you know, Google had all different types of data points on how many websites a traveler went to before they made a booking decision. And from 2015, this article said that consumers visited 38 sites before booking, and that came from Expedia. Well, what's interesting is in our survey that we ran, and I started to include this in the summer survey, we asked the guests who responded how many sites they went to before they made a booking decision. And it was pretty shocking to see that it's gone down to 2 to 4 websites. Now, what I can say is that I think some of this has to do with the confusion around when travelers are going to one site that they might think is just like an individual site. So for example, in the Expedia group, it's Expedia, it's hotels.com, it's travel. So it's all these different websites that have all the same inventory for the most part, that are under one umbrella, but to the traveler, they might not know that that's all one company. So that could be how some of this is skewed a little bit, but really the message that I took from this is that more than ever, we have to be really aware of where we're investing our marketing dollars, what we're getting for that investment, and making sure that, you know, the time and the money that we're spending is what we're expecting to get for that return, especially with travelers going to fewer sites to make those buying decisions. Now, of course, if you look at this data over the whole life cycle of the traveler, the booking journey that they take when they go for the investigation phase and the dreaming phase to the booking phase, certainly the number of sites does change. But when they come down to making the booking, this is what they reported. So I also wanted to dig in a little bit too to understand, because this is something that we had seen and continued to hear about, and some of us ourselves experienced it over the summer, is that the supply just did not match the demand. And we knew that when that wave was coming and folks were ready to travel again, that it was going to come, and it was going to come fast, and we needed to be ready. And certainly everybody, once they got out and they started to travel, everything was getting booked up, and, you know, staffing had been issues and things like that. So I wanted to find out from the traveler perspective, if you had summer travel booked, were you able to find what you were looking for, or how did that change your experience? So yes, we found what we're looking for. Great, that 38%. 19% said that they found a place to stay, but it wasn't their first choice. What was concerning here is 9% had to change their destination because of no availability, but that 34% that didn't decide to travel, that decided not to travel, excuse me, because there was no availability where they were going. This is something that we continued to see and had heard about throughout the summer. So I think the important takeaway here is, you know, making sure, of course, that your availability is always up to date, you know, through your property management software, whatever you're using to manage that through your channel managers. But then also utilizing things like, and I know almost every property management software has this now, where, you know, you have a waiting list for travelers who, if someone cancels, if you do have that last minute cancellation, that you can reach out and you can get connected to the person who, you know, is looking and is ready to book for that stay. So I'm just going to go back in and make sure there isn't anything here that I missed. Okay. Perfect. So when are travelers booking? So we asked specifically when you book your next vacation, not just when you're starting to plan on booking it, but when you book it, what months do you plan to travel? And this aligns perfectly with what we had seen previously. Not only, of course, do we see a high percentage of travelers who are planning to travel this fall, but much later out into early 2022, not just through the winter, but into the spring. So this tells us that travelers are certainly looking past the current month and looking into the future, which is really promising. And one thing I wanted to point out, just back to the point of the length of stay, there's an innkeeper here on the session with us that said that they actually currently have a 6-day stay at the property. So that is really, really great to hear. Something that we've always hoped would happen in the industry, and hope that continues to trend. So on the traveler side, we asked, it's always interesting, what's important when you're booking, but I always want to know what's the most important amenity when you are making a travel buying decision, and not just specifically for B&Bs, but just a general decision. So, free Wi-Fi, it's always been important, still is important. But again, that free cancellation right up there at the top as well. Convenient location, nothing new there. TV in the room, that's always something that we get questions about. And then of course we get into price and things like that. One thing I wanted to point out is, and I didn't pull the data for this, but I will include it when I send out the recording. So for those of you who are either taking notes or trying to keep up, I know it's a lot of information. I will be sending a recording of today's webinar so you can rewatch it. And I also attached a handout, a PDF of all the slides as well. And one of the data points that I wanted to get, and I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine who works in the vacation rental industry, and we were just talking about, statistics, and he was saying, the percentage of VRs that rent and what they can charge when they have a pool that's associated with the property. And I shared that there was a property in my neighborhood, which where I live in Austin, it's close to downtown, but it's not, the fanciest of neighborhoods. But there was a rental that just went up that I was completely shocked that they were charging, I think it was $900 a night to stay at this house down the street from me. And he said, do they have a pool? And I said, yeah, they actually just installed one. And he said, that's why they can charge that, which is just fascinating. And then I did also just see that there is an app now, some of you may have heard of this, where you can, it's like the Uber or the Airbnb for pools, where you can actually go and have time that you rent at someone's pool. So I never thought I would see something like that, but it is now happening in this day and age. So from travelers, we also wanted to know, rank what you feel is most important when making a buying decision. And this is on a weighted average. So we asked them, 1 being the most important, and then we weighted the averages across. So the first one, that gets called out here is, getting the best price, being able to book online, staying safe. These are all equally important when they make the buying decision, outside of getting the best price. So I know I was just on a website right before I started this, and the property was using Think Reservations. And as I had loaded the website, there was a pop-up that came up that talked about, booking direct, getting the best price. And then as I was getting ready to close the site, there was a pop-up that came up and then again reminded me, get the lowest price by booking direct. And so I think there's, of course, a lot of strategies that we can do so the traveler knows that they're getting the best price. But we also have to think about value and balancing that out, which we're going to talk a little bit about as well. So we asked travelers to rate the importance of each of the following when researching and selecting B&Bs for their trip. Guest reviews, they've been around, they're not going anywhere, they're going to continue to be important in the booking process. So just looking at where you are highlighting your reviews. Of course, inspections, if you have those, having those on your site, guest photos. And there's a difference here between guest photos and professional photos. And I think it's interesting because, user-generated content and seeing those photos coming directly from the guest is definitely something that is of interest from there. For all of you that are members of B&B Finder, which I know we've got quite a few of you on the call today, make sure that you're going in and taking some time to update your listing. You can absolutely go in and add in a link to your TripAdvisor reviews so that the rating shows up on your listing, and then also to your Google reviews as well. So if you haven't done that, or if you need any help getting that done, just let us know. We're happy to do that. Knowing that is important to travelers, we want to make sure that you're taking advantage of that. So we also ask travelers where they're staying. Of course, hotels, B&Bs, obvious, but wanted to also compare that against if they're also staying at vacation rentals. There was a lot of talk this summer around a lot of folks out there camping or taking advantage of RV rentals and things like that. But clearly our demographic is more into the traditional lodging types. So for those of the travelers that said that they had not chosen a B&B or weren't planning to choose a B&B, I asked why. And the fact that 41% still said that they don't want to share a bathroom makes my head want to explode, because we've been talking about this my entire career. And the fact that this is still a misperception and a misconception by these travelers that you have to share a bathroom at a bed and breakfast means I still have a lot of work to do in getting this out there. So certainly that is going to be an upcoming article that we are going to be discussing. But also, the option never occurred to me is still surprising. B&Bs are too expensive. Again, not understanding the value and all that's included. But I do have some really great examples of how some properties have gotten creative around some of the pricing options that they're giving to travelers. And then, not having B&Bs with their travels, that makes sense. So also we asked for future travel plans, how far will you be traveling? And this, we had always seen a trend where it was around a one-tank getaway. I think this more than 150 miles from home, even though we saw in a previous slide that most travelers are traveling by car. I think, again, having, traveling further has to do with, lower airfare, more travelers feeling more comfortable traveling by air and things like that. So if you know that your guests are coming within a 150-mile radius or more, think about how you can be more targeted to reach those travelers. So if you're using something like a MailChimp or another type of email provider to send your newsletters to your guests, or to send any kind of correspondence to your traveler and guest database, you can go in and you can be very specific about their location. So we recently tested something like this with our with one of our blogs and how we promoted it through our social channels. And it was really interesting because we did one-tank getaways from, I think the last one we did was from New York. And then when we shared it out on our social channels, we shared it out with travelers that were in that radius, that drive radius of that destination. And we certainly saw a higher conversion and engagement rate with that particular article, because we were being very specific to the travelers who would be interested in that type of content, as opposed to putting it out on our social channel and just putting it out to just the broad audience. So there's definitely ways that you can very easily target some of these travelers who are looking to stay in and around your inns, because certainly one of the highest trending keywords over the last year and a half has been, searching nearby, inns near me, hotels near me, everything, near me. So just kind of thinking of some different ways that you're able to do that. Of course, money always comes down to, impacting how travelers are going to make a decision. And so we asked travelers, has your job been impacted? Yes, it already has. That is down 9% from our summer survey. So So that's good to start to see. There's a lot of folks that if their job was impacted, a lot of that is starting to come back, and certainly a higher percentage that don't expect their job to be impacted, which is great because they may have thought that earlier. They're feeling more confident. And of course, we have our group of travelers who are retired who aren't as impacted by that. So as far as what travelers are planning to spend, this again, I went in and filtered specifically to the travelers who said that they were choosing to stay at a B&B. And what's great to see about this is when we ask them, what is the total amount that you're planning to spend on your next trip? And you can see that 44% plan to spend more than $2,000 on those next stays. So when you think of everything that's included, of course, with gas going up recently, that of course is a factor, but they are still planning to spend a significant amount. So this is one of my favorite slides, and I've had this in my presentation now for the last several of them because I just love the reminder of it. And you know, reading it, the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And this is something that can be used in so many different instances across our industry, specifically around when we think that we're communicating clearly with the guest. Through our websites, we know people don't read, so it can be really challenging, especially when we have so much to communicate these days. So knowing what travelers are looking for and what's important to them, how safe they felt when they've been traveling recently. So I thought this was a really interesting one when we asked, how safe have you felt traveling in the past 4 months? 55% said moderately safe. That was up 10% from summer. Even though extremely safe, I can't wait to travel again, was down 9%. I think that just has to do with the Delta variant. Clearly, the higher percentage of travelers are feeling confident that have traveled and have felt safe. And that has to do a lot with the communication of what they can expect when they start to travel again. And, you know, along with my travel industry experience, I've always worked in the music industry as a hobby in my free time, which is a joke because I don't really have that, but it's a passion of mine. And I've worked music festivals since about 2006. And of course, over the last 2 years, we haven't had one. And we just hosted one over Labor Day weekend in West Virginia at a location called Snowshoe Mountain, which is a mountain resort there. And we capped the festival at about 5,000 people. And we had really clear guidelines going into it. And it was really interesting from my perspective because it really marries my lodging experience because everyone stayed at the property and then my music background. And when we decided what our final COVID regulations and guidelines would be and communicated those out to the guests, it was fascinating to watch their response and how some of them, you know, didn't necessarily agree, but understood, you know, in order to have a safe event of this size, these are the things that we need to do. And so we required that all staff, volunteers, artists, musicians, and vendors all had to have a proof of vaccination. And then all of the guests or fans who were coming to the event either had to have proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test within 72 hours. And so just from a perspective of processing 5,000 people to enter in for a whole holiday weekend, you can imagine that's quite a check-in process. But it was incredibly successful because we were so specific ahead of time and we're so clear about what was needed before arrival that we had one of the easiest load-ins we've ever had and processed everyone. And if someone didn't have the proof of either, we had a rapid test on site and had a COVID regulations person who would administer that test. So we knew once everyone was on site, it was a safe event and it was incredibly successful. So just sharing that perspective because it was a pretty large amount of people to process, but also again, thinking out of the box of what travelers' experiences and guest experiences are like in other types of travel. And so this is a word cloud is what they call it. So when we ask travelers, if they've traveled in the last 4 months, what would you like to share about your experience? And you can see some of the larger words and the more bold words are the words that were used most frequently in the feedback that they had given when they responded to that. So, certainly we as staff at the festival had to wear masks the whole time, even though it was an outdoor event. Anytime we had contact, we had to still wear masks. And again, depending on where you're located, whether or not the state is regulating it or you're choosing to still to mask up. I loved this. I saw this early on because, there's so much in a facial expression that we had lost, and especially in hospitality, when guests are coming and they're communicating with you, and now you just have your eyes to be able to communicate with them, becomes a little bit challenging for them to know what's happening under the mask. So I loved that this hotel group put a picture of their staff member with their name tag. I remember when I was at the inn and I just got the staff to wear a name tag. They had never done that before. And of course we did weddings and a lot of larger events as well. So that was needed, but I just thought this is so simple, but such a great idea. And just like I put my picture in my signature file, and I've been telling innkeepers to do that for years, I thought that is just a cool thing. And, there is still some perception out there. This just happened recently when I was at a conference and I was speaking and I was doing a presentation and I was talking about communicating if you're having any COVID protocols, and an innkeeper raised their hand and they said, well, I don't need to do that, right, anymore because it's over, right? And I thought, no, it's not the end yet. But certainly, again, that depends on where you're located and how regulations have been put in place, but always keeping in mind where that traveler is coming from and what they're experiencing in other types of travel. So we asked innkeepers on that note, which government mandated restrictions are you still experiencing? So none of the above, 67%. Most states have lifted the majority of their restrictions. There are still some that have mask requirements for guests, for staff, social distancing, the vaccination and negative tests vary widely depending on where you're located. But I thought what was even more interesting than that was when we asked the innkeepers, which policies are you enforcing regardless of what's been mandated? And a lot of inns are still choosing to either, of course, social distance, when they can, some requiring staff to be vaccinated and masks to be required. No extra policies, but I really thought that this was interesting because it's a stark difference between what we saw on that previous slide. And I also wanted to include these were some of the comments from that question. And I thought it was interesting, other policies being enforced by properties. Unvaccinated guests must take a tray to the room for breakfast or sit outside at tables. Masks required if not vaccinated. Staff wearing masks while serving breakfast. So, understanding, what works with your business and what you're comfortable with and what your guests are comfortable with. And this one property also commented that masks were required for unvaccinated, but at the same time, they weren't necessarily checking for vaccination cards. So most likely probably putting that in their communication to their guests. So I also wanted to include this because it's been interesting to hear from innkeepers when they have implemented something like this, what kind of backlash or have they gotten any complaints from travelers? And by and large, 92% said that they haven't had any kind of a negative response from the things that they have chosen to implement. So again, if anyone is curious about specifics around that and you wanted to see some different data, I could absolutely go in and say, okay, based on this response, this is how that negative response or from the guest had changed. But just looking statistically, if 92% said that there were very few that complained, I would imagine that is across the board. I've got another property who just popped up and asked why there's no sound. So I'm hoping that has fixed itself. If anybody else is having an issue with the sound, if you can't hear me, please let me know. And that might mean I need to pause my, oh, no trouble with sound there. Okay, good, thank you for letting me know. If that continues, I'll definitely stop my video and that should help it. So we also ask properties, if you're busy right now, despite COVID, what do you attribute to this reason? The majority of properties, again, that they've communicated clearly their protocols and state restrictions have gone down. There are, of course, other things that have played into this throughout. A lot of things that some properties can't control, remote location, private entrances, but contactless check-in, things like that, that you can. And you are providing the safety that guests are looking for. So important that you're already doing all of this work and you're already doing the things to make them feel safer in their travels and in their choice to stay at a B&B. So making sure that's clearly communicated as stated is great. And I continue to see this come up on properties' websites as I'm visiting them daily. And you also, for all of you that are members, if you haven't taken the time to go in, we have multiple places that you can update this also on your listing, and that travelers can search by that. You can put in, if you have a link on your website to a landing page, you can add that in through your dashboard with us. You can update any of the safety features, and these are all searchable from our state and city search pages. And then also, if you have more information, you can of course always use your property description. We don't limit the amount of copy that goes in that description, so certainly use as much as that as you would like and that you feel that you need to communicate. Also, we asked for properties if you have increased or decreased your marketing, and 42% still said that they hadn't changed their marketing, or that it stayed the same. So what I like to look at is some of those reasons why. And clearly, not all marketing has to be directly out of pocket. So when we think of marketing, if we're thinking of, fees for signing up for a platform or PPC or maintaining your website, of course, there's cost that associates with all of that. But certainly when we ask the innkeepers for other ways that they've increased their marketing, specials and packages, deals and discounts, these types of things are consistently coming up. And there's been some really creative ideas that we've seen over the last several months, over the last year. This is one that came up in the recent survey, the fall survey. The Biltmore Village Inn in Asheville, North Carolina, their property's been in business for 20 years. I believe the innkeepers have run it, I think they said 3 to 5 years. And what they're doing is, I see this a lot, picnic lunches to go, in-room charcuterie packages instead of a social hour. So where a lot of inns, we did it at the Round Barn, and I always wish more people came to my social hour that they did, but instead of taking that time and that money and not being able to social distance or whatever it might be, they changed that into a charcuterie package, which has been really popular for them. And I always like to mention, anytime you're putting something like this together, making sure that it's easy for the guest to book and that it's clear, it's on your website. Most property management softwares now, of course, you can add those specials and packages in so they can make that add-on during the booking process. And there isn't one inn that I've worked with who's done that hasn't seen an increase in their revenue. The Courtwood Inn in Murphy's, California has been, they've been running the inn for 7 years. They added a stay your way rate plan with meals optional. And I thought this was brilliant because I've also talked to a lot of inns that it's not just that they're looking at, their food costs or they're looking at pricing and how to be more creative with that, but it's also, guests that are choosing to not participate with breakfast or whatever it might be. So what this property did is they actually put together different pricing that the guests can choose when they're checking out for whichever room they selected. And so you can see here, these are 3 rates for 1 room. In their checkout, they use Think Reservations. And the first one is the stay your way rate. And it's very clear, great if you want to sleep in or eat dinner early. This rate does not include a full breakfast or wine and cheese, which can be added individually when you book your room. So they really broke down what those food costs were. And this gave them the ability to give the guests the choice of what types of food options they would like during their stay. So I just thought that was really brilliant to do. And also something that ties into those longer stays, and I'm curious for the property who said that they have a 6-night stay right now, the whole remote work of course, completely changed over the pandemic and over the last year and a half. And I loved this when I saw it, the WFH, you know, you'd think work from home, but work from Hills, and they have this customized workation packages available. And you see this more and more because as more businesses are choosing not to go back to the traditional office setting, and you have more people who are experiencing what it's like to be a remote worker and to be able to work from anywhere, they're gonna go out, they're gonna wanna stay longer, they can be places that they couldn't have been before, and they have this flexibility in their lifestyle that they didn't have before. So again, thinking outside the box of how you can attract some of those types of travelers as well. And I also included this because I thought that these were some other really great ideas. Expanding their activities to book tours before arrival. And again, that's during that checkout path. They're now selling out of those things where they didn't previously do that. Bartering with local restaurants, offering $50 and $100 in local restaurant gift certificates for stays of 7 nights or more. Thought that was great. It reminded me of when I was at the Round Barn, and we tried to work with, I mean, the little town of Vermont that our inn was located in didn't have a stoplight. So you can imagine how small it is, quintessential New England. And so we had to work really closely with with anyone that was in our community. And there was a particular restaurant that whenever we made a reservation for one of our guests, they kept a tally of how many reservations that we were sending them. And then they would offer that back to us in different types of credits that we could use. So then I could use that as incentives and things for some of the staff. So this one as well I liked. Complimentary wine, welcome wine basket with a bottle of local wine, snacks, homemade cookies, instead, and again, replacing that social hour that they had previously done. And that's become quite popular. So another quick reminder of anything that you're doing, making sure that you're going in and taking the time to update your listings. So I wanted to take, I know we're just a few minutes over here, but of course I wanted to take some time to just update you on some of the things that we're getting ready to launch, some of the new products that we've been working on. As I mentioned, the team, our small but mighty team, is getting together tomorrow here in Austin to have our 2022 planning meeting, and I'm so excited about the things that we have coming up and the things that we're going to be releasing. Some of the things that I want to share with you that are going to be released here really in the next month. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is, of course, our team and our ever-growing team. A lot of you know, of course, myself, Tim Wilson, who's been in the industry forever, longer than me by, I think, about a year or so, a couple of years. But something that I'm very excited about is that Nick Goldreyer just joined the team here. It's been just about a month and a half. And Nick is actually Eric, the owner of bnbfinder's son. I've known Nick since he was very young, and he is just an incredible person. And it's really great because, you know, he went to school, his background was in engineering. He went to Vanderbilt, and he decided, you know, while he was in school and after graduating, that his passion really lies in travel. And, you know, of course, it's in the family. And so he chose to join the team at bnbfinder. So it's really great to have him on board and have someone who's so young and so passionate and excited and who's grown up in the industry to be part of the team and keeping with our family business model. That is what we've, you know, talked about since the beginning, since we acquired the business from Mary back in April of 2019. You know, we've always said we're a family business and we're going to stay a family business. And this is such a great addition to that family business that we have. And one of the products that we are getting ready to launch, this is just an image of one of the designs, is our gift card program has been incredibly successful and has grown exponentially since we acquired the business. And the reason why this is
Okay, I think you can hear me now. Yes, okay, great, awesome. Okay, oh, it makes me so happy. All right, so you can hear me and see me, which is great. So our gift card program, as I was saying, when we first launched it, we inherited the technology that we had previously. And so we've known all along we wanted to go in and we wanted to rebuild the process, not only from the traveler side and just making it a lot easier for them to purchase a gift card, but also from the redemption side, which I know that a lot of you have had some frustrations. Completely understand being able to look up the balance of a gift card online, and especially as you're getting them in over the weekend and not having to fill out a form to get that. So we've completely rebuilt the entire gift card process, and that is going to be launching here in the next couple weeks. And what is super exciting about that is now the automation of looking up the balance of the gift card. You won't have to fill out a form to do that. You can see here just the traveler experience of going in and purchasing the gift card is just a lot cleaner. And one of the things that I like to remind properties of, and that's so important, is that, you know, when we initially had invested in, you know, acquiring the business, the gift cards were 15% commission. So that, of course, for a lot of properties was a pretty significant commission, even though that commission is only charged on the value of the card. So if someone has a $100 gift card and they come and stay and they have a $400 stay, you're only paying the commission on that $100. But we really wanted to be able to do the best that we could for all of the members and for everyone who's accepting the gift cards. So I think, gosh, it's been about 7 months now, I want to say, that we changed that, and there is no commission for properties who have the B&B Finder badge added to their site. There's a couple of things that you do to qualify for this no commission structure, and there is a processing fee because, of course, we have to pay that credit card fee. So it's, I think, 3.5% or something like that. It's essentially equal to what you would be paying to your credit card provider if you were running that $100 charge, right? So that's how the fee has been reduced. And then you also have the ability to receive automatic payments. So previously we had only been doing paper checks, and now you can sign up for ACH. And we're really just trying to make the entire process a lot easier on your end from accepting the cards through the traveler side of being able to redeem those cards as well. So let me see if you can look at this. I think I'm just making sure that everyone can still see me. And okay, yep, everybody got the audio back. Perfect. The next product that we are launching, that's going to be launching about the same time as the updated gift card program, is our Traveler iOS app. And this is something that I am so excited about because I have always wanted to have a traveler-facing app. The plan is also to, of course, build an innkeeper app, so you'll be able to manage your listing and everything through an app. But the first app that we're going to be launching is the traveler side. And this is currently being built out. These are mock-ups that you're looking at here. I just downloaded the alpha and the beta version onto my iPhone. And if anyone's interested in being a beta tester for this product, you know, definitely let me know. I'd be happy to get you involved. And it's really going to be a game changer because there is not an app of this caliber that is in our specific lodging sector, right? So there isn't anything that's specific to professionally run bed and breakfast that has this many inns that are listed. And I'm just thrilled that we're going to be able to get this out into the market. And when we do launch, it's going to be a bit of a soft launch. Of course, we have, just like all of you, 60% of our traffic is mobile. So we want to make sure that the rollout is very smooth and that we start to gather back some data that we need during the rollout before we push it and recommend that all of our mobile traffic downloads the app and starts to participate. And we've also been working really, really hard since the pandemic hit on our SEO and our search placement. And for any of you who have worked on this on your own website, you can imagine, especially with the changes that Google has made over the years, that it's a lot of work to get things to where we are happy with the results, and we are happy with, definitely, of course, page one is great to have a search result on, but we want to be number one or as close to number one as possible. So for all state terms, we are ranking on the first page of Google results. So it depends on the keywords and how they're structured. So sometimes you might think that the most searched keyword for your destination would be, let's say, Massachusetts bed and breakfast. But in fact, it might be a bed and breakfast Massachusetts, and it can be something, as simple as that. But you'll see, and what hopefully you're starting to see pick up in the bookings that you're getting from B&B Finder, is that our placement has just grown exponentially over the last year. And we could not be happier to see the results. Not only are we seeing B&B Finder, and this is a great example where I just did a simple search for bed and breakfast, but also we are ranking for things like best bed and breakfast, best of 2021, and coming up multiple times in those searches, which we surpassed some of the larger sites in those search results, which has been really great. We also launched a referral program. So for anyone who's interested in getting free membership for properties that they refer, this is definitely an opportunity for you now. And it's really easy for you to do. This is in your dashboard. You can copy the referral code, share it out with anyone who is going to be signing up that you're referring, and then you'll get that additional time added to your listing. And I also wanted to mention, I know now we're about 15 minutes over. I apologize for that. We've just got a couple more slides to go through. We are continuing now that trade shows are happening again and we're back out. I've already been to the Texas conference. I was at the ALP conference, the regional conference in Florida. And these are the conferences that we have coming up. Of course, November is always the craziest month, so we're going to be really busy in November. But I do want to mention, if you're a member of an association, if you have an upcoming conference and it's not listed here, definitely let us know, because I have always been a huge advocate, both personally and professionally, to support, to not only support the conferences, but to support the associations that are so important to our industry and coming together for the advocacy that they provide. So absolutely, let me know if there's something that you don't see there. And I also wanted to include this because I feel like there's still some properties that might not be familiar with the changes that were made when bedandbreakfast.com went away, and they Vrbo decided to white label bedandbreakfast.com. And the reason why I mention this is because pretty much every day I will see, I'll go to a property's website and I will see a bedandbreakfast.com badge. And if there's anything you do today, go to your website and make sure you do not have that badge on your website. Because if you do, I guarantee you're probably still linking to what you thought was your bedandbreakfast.com listing, but now it just links out to the Vrbo homepage. And that is a page that, yes, it says bed and breakfast on it. It's part of the reason why they just started to show up in those organic searches, is because they still use the keywords bed and breakfast. But if you look at that page, it says bed and breakfast in Austin, and then every group of properties that's listed, it says vacation rentals underneath it. So definitely want to make sure that you're not sending traffic to vacation rentals when it should be being sent to you. So all of you that are members of B&B Finder, this is where the links go to that I mentioned. So all of you that are members, I know there's a lot of you on the call, make sure, again, this is, if you do one other thing after you get off this call, you can add the badge to your B&B Finder listing on your website. We make it super easy. We've got the code, the badge, everything right in your dashboard, so you're able to do this. And I also want to just remind everyone, that we're all in this together. And we have been, we always have been, we always will be. And one of the things that I've been talking about with some other vendors in the industry that I'll be presenting at the ALP conference coming up in Baltimore and in 2022 is we're going to be speaking about direct bookings, and the whole book direct education movement came up again, and making sure that we're keeping the industry updated on changes that are happening on the legislative level and things like that. And I know that it can be overwhelming and that there's a lot of information, but focusing on those goals and those handful of things that you want to go in and make a difference of. I also wanted to mention before we wrap up that you saw, for those of you who participated in the survey, again, thank you. The winner of the 3 months for free who participated and put in their property name is Arsenic and Old Lace Inn out in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. So we've already added that for them to their listing for participating. And I also wanted to thank our partners and our sponsors for getting the word out about the survey. I always, every time I send it out, I think we're going to have so many inns that are going to respond. And we had more this time than we have for any other. And that was due in part to our partners going in and sending out also to all of their innkeepers. So getting more people to participate and getting more of this data is just so essential and so crucial for us as we continue to move forward in the industry. So I know we're about 20 minutes over, so I don't want to keep folks on for questions. There were a couple that came in, and I see some other folks that had shared it. So if I missed anyone, I'm so sorry. I just saw Tammy said that she had shared it out. And there were a couple of other questions. So there was one question about how do you let me know that you'd like to be involved in the iOS beta test. There's my email address right there on the screen. Very easy. It's just janice@bnbfinder.com if you're interested. I'll also be reaching out to our members, and it'll be in a member newsletter where you'll be able to sign up if you want to be a beta tester for some of our upcoming products. So I love my branded wooden spoon. Yes, there'll be more of those at a conference soon near you. So I think that's mostly the questions that we got, everything that came through, and it looks like everybody came back. So I cannot thank you enough for joining me and listening to me over the last hour and 20 minutes. I hope that you learned even just a few new things and have a little more insight into travelers and where they're at and where we're at and going as an industry. And I can't wait to continue to work with you and to grow this industry and to really elevate it, like I said at the beginning, to the category and the exposure that it deserves, that all of you have provided. So thank you. And I can't wait to see all of you hopefully at an upcoming conference soon, or at an in-visit or an in-market visit as well. So I hope everyone has a great afternoon. I'll send you the recording, and please reach out for anything that we can do to help. That's exactly what we're here to do. So have a great afternoon, everyone.